welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the Procurement Pivots podcast. As always, we're excited to be here, aren't we, Laura?
Yeah, definitely.
How are you today?
Yeah, I am good, thank you. I am good. We're recording this midweek, aren't we? So it's been a good week, been productive. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. Slightly tired because it's been good and productive, but there've been a few slightly later nights than I would have hoped for, to be honest, with some stuff that we're working on in the background. So yeah, I'm good, but a little bit tired, being honest.
But we will be able to do this in person together next week. So we shall be seeing each other. So that will be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're bringing a new topic to the table, and actually, this is a pivot that comes up in conversation quite frequently, I would say, but in really different capacities. But today's focus is about looking at that kind of shift from operational to strategic. And yeah, I think, we hear a lot about it, particularly in the world that we're in right now. And, I think in individual conversations at very different stages of people's careers. So we just thought this would be a really interesting topic to start to unpack. And like always, we think this probably is quite a big topic that we may well come back to and kind of delve into deeper at a later date. But yeah, we thought this was a great place to start.
Yeah, no, that's a great summary. And like you say, it gets brought up a lot, the how to step out of operational, out of the weeds of it, as I call it, into the strategic, because that's where we want procurement to be as a profession, as a function in an organization. So it's always been one of those topics that as long as I've been doing this, I've heard about. So yeah. So where should we start now?
Well, I mean, where should we start? Good question. I mean, maybe even just this kind of context that we're in right now, like the landscape within procurement, because I think, publicly we're hearing a lot about this shift. Procurement is not going to be operational anymore. It's going to be much more strategic. I think actually there's quite a lot of worry and concern around that as well. So I think, very different views, for a lot of people, that shift is incredibly positive. It is the future direction. But, for some people that are in more operational roles, hearing that, we're seeing a reduction in operational roles and an increase in more strategic roles, like that in itself can be quite kind of worrying and concerning. So, I just think kind of, almost like recognizing the space we're in right now. Yeah, I think often a lot of the current conversations are tied to the increased use of kind of AI and digitalization, and what's that going to mean for what functions look like in the future and the types of roles that people are going to be doing. But I think actually, like when you look back in procurement, I think we've seen this a lot over the years, like functions looking to kind of increase their efficiency in how they operate. And so, there was a whole wave of, offshoring for a period of time, and, offshoring, outsourcing as well. And, a lot of those activities kind of were very much around kind of focusing on the strategic as the core function and kind of moving out some of those more operational. So yeah, I kind of thought it's worth mentioning, but I don't think, what we're talking about today isn't just going to be tied to that type of kind of operational to strategic. I think actually this comes up in so many different guises, doesn't it, in the conversations that we have.
It's like you say about context, because it does mean different things to different people in different organizations and sectors. And I think that's
Yeah,
part of the challenge, is that procurement will look and feel differently, whichever organization you are in. Because if you're in
yeah,
public sector, you've got the Procurement Act to think about. If you're in private, you won't have the same starting blocks
yeah,
in that sense. And I think that can be really hard for a profession that has a lot of process within it.
mm,
So it's that's what I find really interesting when people go, well, what should I be doing? And again, here comes the
yeah,
should.
yeah,
But I think something that's really important when you are thinking about that shift from operational to strategic, what does that mean for you in your context where you are right now? What are you
yeah,
seeing within your business? What are you seeing within your
yeah,
industry? Because that is going to be part of the data, like we've talked about previously, part of the data that will help you to start then make your next steps
yeah.
to reaching that.
Yeah, and I think that I the first half of my career was outside of procurement, and one of the quick observations coming into the procurement space was like the use of keywords and language, and we have a relatively small number. I mean, I know there's like a million acronyms, etc., but there's a relatively small number of kind of words and phrases that are used in procurement. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent probably here, but
Go for it.
for instance, job titles, there's quite a small number of job titles in procurement, and they are used so very, very, very differently. And so, a procurement manager in one company could be quite a junior person that is actually pushing purchase orders around and not really doing much actual strategic procurement. In other environments, I've come across procurement managers that are leading big teams of quite senior people. So I think, tying this back to the topic today and your point, understanding of what do you mean by that word is absolutely critical here, because so many people have very, very different views of the same word. And strategic is one of the big buzzwords. It has been for some time in procurement. It's the aspiration. It might be the reality in some environments, but what does that actually mean? And there is this drive to transform it to be much more strategic, but what does that mean? Like, what does it actually mean? So I just think yeah, that definition piece, I think in the context of this conversation is actually so, so important, because what is it we're actually talking about, and are people even joined up in their thinking of what they're talking about?
And this is the other thing, isn't it? I really thought you were going to bring up the debate that we often see on LinkedIn, procurement versus purchasing.
Oh,
It is or
okay.
it isn't. Does it matter?
Yeah,
So, but I think you make a really good point, because yeah, we there does need to be an element of alignment, but at the same time, you've got to bring it back to your own context and not get too
totally.
worried by the noise of it all,
Yeah,
because what's important is where you are now in your
yeah, yeah,
organization. And I know
yeah.
obviously you do so much work on the positioning side of things for people setting themselves up for the next move. But if you are internally in that element of moving from operational to strategic, what matters is that here and now, where you
Mm,
are right now. So we've got to look at it from all those different aspects, haven't we? What does it mean when you're looking to
yeah,
position yourself? What does it mean where you are right now?
yeah. Because actually
Yeah.
I think this kind of shift from operational to strategic, I think we were talking about this before, like this is a relevant topic for so many different people in so many different ways. I think actually sometimes people earlier in their career, operational buyers wanting to move into a more strategic role, maybe being asked to behave more strategically, but not really knowing where to start, versus, the established procurement leaders that, maybe are, they're striving for more strategic procurement in the environment they're in, but they're getting caught up in the day-to-day firefighting and all the operational stuff that's getting thrown at them every minute, every day, every week. So I think this is going to mean very, very different things for different people. But I think, yeah, like you say, kind of understanding in your own context, what does this actually
Mm.
mean now? And I think, aligning it, your own view with those other relevant people internally as well. Because this is, I think, a big disconnect. I think, one of the things that I see, um, and often where people are stepping into leadership roles and it's just not what they thought they were going to be stepping into. There's not the backing for a true strategic function. I think sometimes people don't, we hear what we want to hear. So if you want a strategic role and you know yourself what that means, when you hear the word strategic
Mm.
used in an interview, in a conversation, it feels positive. It's like, great. I'm looking to, develop strategic. They're saying they want strategic, but unless you unpack that and understand what do I mean by it versus what do you mean by it, and are we joined up and are we aligned? And that disconnect is a big reason why people go into roles, and sometimes within the first 3 to 6 months, they are realizing that that environment is totally different to what they anticipated. And some of the kind of, the deeper questioning to
Mm.
sense check alignment or misalignment. It's just missing the gaps, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Like you used the word behaviorally earlier, and then we're talking about that misalignment of expectations and maybe even perception. Because I also think that that shift from operational to strategic, there has to be a place for the mindset element of it, where sometimes you've been put into a leadership role, you've stepped up, and then you've got to make that mindset shift. That sometimes takes a bit longer to catch up.
Mm.
And again, we've talked about what it looks like within the context of your organization, but for some procurement leaders, they're taking that procurement function to a place where it hasn't yet been in that
Yeah,
organization.
yeah,
And that then can also create those elements of doubt and those things that we've talked about before with the imposter syndrome. But you have to be clear on the expectations
yeah,
of what the organization sees as strategic and what you're working towards as well. And
yeah.
that mindset is incredibly important, because if you do feel out of your comfort zone, that's when the risk is higher of slipping back into the operational
Mm,
stuff, because it's
yeah,
more comfortable. You know what you're doing there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I
And I think
think that
sometimes, sorry to
no,
carry
no,
on.
no, just that after defining the expectation, you've then got to step into that mindset of it, right?
And I think sometimes the noise of the operational can almost feel a bit louder. It's day to day, it's kind of challenges, problems, issues, firefighting coming your way, and often I know a lot of the kind of the procurement leaders that I've spoken to, particularly they go into these new organisations and new roles, and part of what they want to do is, sometimes they're stepping into environments where there hasn't been the right engagement with the business, and so they're working really hard to start building all of these stronger relationships, and suddenly there's this tipping point of like those relationships are turning into requirements and conversations and demands, and it's not always about the longer term, is it? It's sometimes more kind of reactive, and suddenly that noise and that volume is starting to come through quite quickly, and so it's actually it's incredibly difficult actually when suddenly these people that you've been working on developing relationships with, they are coming to you with stuff, but actually, is that the right kind of activity to be focused on, and is that going to stop you achieving those longer term goals?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think this is the thing, it's so multifaceted, isn't it? Like so many of the topics that we tackle on these episodes, because the and we come back to those same things every time, that clarity. You need that clarity to make your next move. And sometimes when the noise is so big and
Yeah,
so loud, that's when we can lose our way a bit
yeah,
and we just end up getting pushed back into the firefighting,
yeah.
really.
But I think just understanding, it's like, whatever your situation is right now. So whether this topic is resonating because you're a leader and you are wanting and hoping to be able to operate more strategically than you can right now, versus actually if you're someone maybe in a mid-level role, doing more operational activities, but you'd love to go and do a strategic role. I think whatever your situation is, it's almost it's really important to take stock of the where am I now versus where I want to be, and actually what are some of those what is the gap? Is it a skills gap? Is it an experience gap? Is it a relationship gap? Like, what is it that could help you to get to that next place? I mean, I was on I ran a surgery, one of my procurement job search surgeries the other day. And so, for anyone that doesn't know, sometimes I'll put on these surgeries for people to come along and they have the opportunity to ask any question that is relevant to their career or to their job search. And there was an individual that asked a question that comes up quite frequently. So this was someone that was sort of fairly experienced, mid level, I would say, but they had just got their MSIPS qualification and they were sat doing, much more operational kind of mid-level roles. And their question to everyone was, actually, I really do want to move into that strategic, but how can I make that move? And, from a skill set perspective, what are the areas and the skills that I need to develop that I'm probably not using right now? But also, how do you even get that opportunity when you've not done strategic work? It's normally the people that have strategic experience that get that exposure. So how do you even get that first opportunity to kind of make that shift and that move? And so, yeah, I think kind of part of that conversation was to that individual in particular was firstly looking at some of the skill set that is more likely to be required in more strategic roles as you step into more strategic roles, and certainly some more of that kind of deeper commercial acumen that's required, the kind of the ability to look at the longer term decisions, not just the kind of shorter term and the more reactive, but the ability to kind of work more strategically with suppliers and stakeholders and relationship building and influence. But even developing those skills, like sometimes it can still be difficult to be given that opportunity. So we're also talking about, what are some of the things you can do internally if you're in an environment where you've mainly done operational work and you'd actually love to do more strategic work, but you don't know how to get that opportunity. So we were kind of looking at, actually, I suppose asking for where you can support in other areas outside of your day job. That can be like, just such a great way of like just starting to get exposure, starting to build relationships with people in other areas of the function or the business where they are working on more strategic activities. Even, someone else actually mentioned it on the call, getting an internal mentor, someone that can help and support you in those areas where you're looking to develop your skills and experience.
Yeah, and I really like what you said earlier about the knowing what type of gap. If it is it a relationship gap? Is it
Yeah.
like a particular commercial acumen gap and such? And I think this episode builds nicely upon what we did last week, which was around the strengths, because we all have different strengths, right? And so if you already are of a preference where you are extroverted and you're able to go and build relationships easily, or you're very results driven, that's where you can start by looking at those opportunities. For a few people that I work with, they really identify with being introverts, and they're at a senior level, but they're like, how can I embrace that next step without betraying who I am? And people with introverted qualities are brilliant at relationship building. They're just not the loudest person in the room.
Yeah.
And so it's about recognizing that strength and applying it with these gaps that we were just talking about, with these, where is the bit that you need to sort of step out your comfort zone. I've seen some brilliant examples where people with those introverted qualities have been able to step out and be more strategic and build those relationships, but in a different way.
Yeah.
You'll never see them at a networking event.
Yeah.
But the way that they connect with their stakeholders differently by having those one-on-one chats, catching them for a coffee in the office, and connecting those dots is also incredibly important, because these things, this strategic elevation is
Mm.
accessible to all of us. You've just got to find the
Yeah,
path that works for you.
yeah, such a great point. I think, there are so many different ways of getting from A to B, aren't there? That's the
Yeah.
thing. And that is the beauty. Like whatever it is that we're talking about, it's generally not the case that you can only make that happen in one way. And it is leaning into those strengths that you actually most enjoy. It might not be talking up in a big group meeting. It, like you say, it might be developing stronger, better relationships one on one. And actually, like you say, and again, quite a lot of my clients would kind of define themselves as introverts, but it's often asking better, more inquisitive questions, often listening better, really understanding what it is that stakeholder is needing and wanting and trying to say to you, rather than quickly going in with a solution and trying to prove your worth to them. It's like, extracting all that really, amazing information that can then help you to kind of, help you to support them. Um, so yeah, I think that understanding of, you know, when you say you want to become more strategic, what do you actually mean by that? Let's actually break that down into, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What type of activities does that include? What type of behavior is going to be needed? What are the skills you need to develop? What are the skills you can, and the strengths that you already have, but you can, celebrate and use even more of? I think it's really, yeah, it's understanding, yeah, kind of, what does this mean for me? Like, how can I get to that next step? There'll always be a route. There'll always be a route. And, using the kind of example of, who else internally could support me with this? Who could I support internally to give me more exposure and more experience in this area? But if you can't get it internally, like I know some people and they just, they genuinely don't think it's possible. Like some businesses do not have that appetite to think and act and behave strategically. They're all about the short term. They're not about the long term. And in that instance, like if you want to remain with that business and you still want to develop your skill set, it might be that you need to kind of gain that knowledge and experience in other ways from other people that are elsewhere. Maybe it's kind of, doing some studying, some courses, I mean, there's so much free resource nowadays, isn't there? Like, we're in a world where you could probably go on LinkedIn and put in, a subject, and there'll be free courses that you could do like in less than an hour very quickly. So I think it's, looking at, where are you now? Where is it you want to get to? And actually really understanding, what does that look like? And then, what is the gap really?
Mm.
Um,
And this is where, as well, this is what I love about coaching, when you extract that answer from the individual, when you give them the confidence to actually go, oh, actually, I do know the answer to this. You're just showing them the mirror for them to work through it and asking the
mm,
right questions, because we all have that view of and that perception of what being strategic is.
yeah.
And we either have a mindset of it's within reach or it isn't.
Mm,
And
yeah,
so we need to work on building up that confidence, because you are capable of being strategic. I mean, don't
yeah,
get me wrong. There are people I work with who don't have this thing. They're already operating at a very high level, but it's around increasing the impact.
yeah,
So again, and the reason why I bring this up is because that definition of strategic is
yeah,
incredibly different depending on where you are in your career and context.
yeah,
And
totally.
we can feel totally daunted by it if we're thinking at step 10 and we're actually at step 1. So
Yeah,
that's the benefit of breaking it down like this with a coach. It really is.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I think the other thing I wanted to kind of raise as well, and it is going back to, I kind of going back to the visibility topic that does come up quite a bit, but I think sometimes, and this isn't applicable at all in all instances, and certainly I know, many of the leaders I support are very vocal about where they want to take things and how they want to get there. But sometimes people do internalize kind of that desire of they're kind of hoping and wanting to step into a more strategic role, or they're wishing that they could create more time to focus on the more strategic, but they're not necessarily sharing that kind of desire or that interest. And others sometimes just don't know. Just because that's the way you're feeling doesn't mean that others are automatically going to know, unless you're being quite explicit in communicating that. So it's also kind of thinking about, what is it you're sharing with other people, not just the desire to do it, but also, in the instance of, perhaps someone that's only ever done an operational role and they would love to step into more strategic, if they are then starting to get a little bit more exposure in other projects as like a bit of a sideline, how could they then communicate some of that experience as well, so that they're being thought of for some of those more kind of strategic roles. But a lot of people don't, they don't communicate it. Like, sometimes the first time a business hears that someone on the team was wanting to be operating more strategically, it's when they're handing their notice. Like, some people, they will sit there and they will be not happy with an element of their job, but they do not explore, like, they wait maybe for an opportunity like that to come up, but they don't, for whatever reason, lots of different reasons, and we don't have time to kind of go into it now, but for various reasons, I'd go as far as saying many people don't communicate that desire. And actually, it may well be that there could have been lots of different avenues for that desire to be satisfied internally without the need to move. And this is why we then see, when people hand in their notice, suddenly the business is running around saying, oh, but we could give you this project or this project or this or that. And sometimes it is achievable with, conversations in the right way at the right time with the right people.
I think you make a great point as well, right? Because sometimes when we've had an experience somewhere, we then have an understanding of what isn't possible. But sometimes it's about asking different questions, and sometimes it is too late, right? The horse has already bolted when they've handed their notice in. But actually, if we were to look at what it really means to them and where they could ask. But I'm not going to ignore, I don't think we should ignore that there are some places, if you've not had the opportunity and you've asked for it,
Yeah,
that can be quite frustrating, because again, it makes that gap feel even bigger.
yeah,
And sometimes I wonder if it's because, like, especially when it comes to the strategic element, and maybe this is just me and my weird sense of
yeah,
humor, but sometimes I think when you get to that level and you want to be more strategic, you're looking around thinking, well, someone needs to tell me what that means or what it is. And I sometimes think it's because everybody's still figuring it out for themselves.
yeah, yeah,
And
true.
I'm laughing about it because I always like to remind people that everyone who's around you that looks like they've got their stuff together
Hmm.
is still figuring it out in many a way.
Oh,
That we're all human. And
yeah,
sometimes we look up at these people that we put on pedestals and go, oh, they are the be all and end all. They're the
yeah,
strategic leader. And it's like, but I
yeah,
tell you something, they are still human.
yeah,
So it's,
yeah,
and I think we need to remind ourselves of that. This stuff is not unattainable for anybody.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other point, you know, if you if you would like to be considered for more strategic kind of work, a role, or to start to deliver more strategic, it's like, almost, how could you start to step into that without being given like official kind of permission? It's like, how
Mm.
can you take on a bit more of that role? So, thinking maybe more from like a mid-level professional who is sat in an operational role, and it doesn't necessarily appear like there is an obvious strategic route. Like, in that role, how could you how could you develop that current role more strategically?
Mm.
How could you identify an opportunity to make something significantly better in the longer term? How could you identify a way of improving a broken supplier relationship? Like, it's actually kind of like almost giving yourself permission to operate maybe above the level of the job description and show ownership, take ownership, show initiative, be proactive, rather than wait for the permission or be told to do it or be asked to do it.
Mm.
Um, it's like, actually, can you identify how being a bit more strategic in your role could improve the environment? And could you just, sometimes could you just run with it? Could you, almost create an opportunity and go and talk to your boss about it and say, look, I've been looking at this and I really do think, actually you're showing strategic longer term thinking without being given permission to do so. It's taking that initiative and it's being really proactive before you're asked.
And I love that, because also I think this really emphasizes well this thing about tweaks. And I think we've said it
Yeah.
before, but you're never as far away from it as you think you are. The perception is often that the gap's this big. And if you're watching on YouTube, my hands are really wide, like big fish, little fish, big fish, little fish.
Yeah. Cardboard
But
box.
yeah, cover box, let's finish it off. But the perception normally seems to be bigger than what actually the reality is. And so doing that where you are right now, because actually you're already operating in your comfort zone with the operational,
Yeah.
take that opportunity to go, okay, now that I'm clear on what I want that to look like, even if things change for me in my
Yeah.
career, where I am and what I'm doing, what tiny tweak can I do and how can I communicate that with
Yeah.
who I need to communicate it with?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a great opportunity, and the stakes are lower. The stakes will not feel as high doing it in that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're never as far away as you think you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I mean, actually, it reminds me of my career. I was going to sound like an old lady then. Back in the year 2000, when I started my career in recruitment, and actually back then it was a very, like, I suppose, quite traditional linear career trajectory. You would come in as a kind of trainee recruitment consultant, then you're a recruitment consultant, then you're a senior, then you start managing a team, and it was quite an obvious kind of linear journey. But I remember my first boss saying to me, you know, really, if you if and when you start kind of almost demonstrating the qualities at the next level, like, people get promoted and can get promoted very quickly when they're already seen at that next level,
Mm,
before they're given the title, before they're given the promotion. And it's kind of like stepping into that future direction of yourself before you're officially there on paper. And I do think this is a really important point for anyone listening to this, no matter what kind of stage of your career you're at. Um, I think it's looking at, where is it you would most love to get to? And it might be longer term, it might be short, medium term, but where is it you want to get to? And what does that version of you look like versus where you are today? And again, it's this same gap analysis. Where am I today? Where do I want to be? And what is the difference? Because when you start showing up as that future version, others see you as that as well. And so actually, if it is about, I want people to understand this strategic value, or my strategic value, well, how can you start displaying that now without being given that permission?
mm. Yeah, that's a great one. Because, like you say, stepping into the role and showing that you're already operating at that level is great when you can see what that next level is. My experience is rather different, because in the last 6 roles of my career when I was in house, there was never that next step wasn't yet visible because it
Yeah,
didn't exist. Like I
yeah,
was I was doing the role for the first time. The role was created, I
yeah,
filled it, and then again. So I found that I think that's a great example when you can see that line of sight. And for many
yeah,
procurement people that exists.
yeah,
It absolutely exists, because obviously you go from category manager,
yeah.
etc., up to head of. But for me, where I found that really difficult is that I had no blueprint to follow. So I had to
Mm,
be creative. I had to
yeah,
go, well, where are the problems? Where are we? Where do
yeah,
we want to get to? And sometimes it is a struggle when you're in that. Now of the color energy that I lean into in terms of personality type, that I thrive on that. But it's it's something that if you don't have that, that's where you do need to look at what other examples exist in the business
yeah,
that might not be procurement focused,
yeah,
but where they can show, where you can borrow
yeah,
skills and ideas from other roles where they've also experienced
yeah,
growing something new for the first time. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it's interesting when that line of sight is there, you've got something to aim for. When it's
yeah,
not there, you need to look at where you can borrow it from in terms of how have they done it in their role, right? Okay,
yeah,
how can I put that into
yeah.
mine?
And I think, this again, it ties into taking ownership of some intentional career planning for
Mm,
yourself. And it's, if you don't take time to really think about these things, um, they just don't happen by themselves that much anymore. Like I think years ago, like opportunity would just present itself much more frequently. It's harder now because there are fewer new roles being created. We're not sat next to our colleagues day to day, so they don't get to see everything that you're doing. You don't get to build some of those, like, just kind of in passing relationships at the coffee machine, sat in the canteen together, etc. So it is harder than it was. Like people are having to work much more intentionally in order to create those less obvious opportunities. But
yeah,
again, I think this is it's leaning back into what we were talking about last time. It's you know what is it I most enjoy? Like even, with my clients, like sometimes they're coming to me and they're like, and often it is, I feel stuck. Like I don't know what it is I want next. I don't know how to get to the next level. And often they are very much just looking in that procurement kind of box. But it's like, okay, well, let's start looking at some of your stakeholder relationships. Forget the labels, forget the job title. Where do you like, which areas of the business are you absolutely loving supporting? Where do you think you've got really great relationships? And then it's starting to look at, okay, well, how could you develop those relationships further, so that actually potentially there could be kind of, opportunities created over time in other parts of the business that are absolutely playing to your strengths, whatever they may be, commercial often, relationship building, decision making, but used in a different way. Same skills, same strengths, but used in a different capacity. And I've had this actually in the last week or so, that one of the clients that I've been supporting, senior procurement, they're now transitioning into a chief of staff role, off the back of some of those deeper, stakeholder relationships. And that was created through really kind of looking at how they could elevate that relationship further just beyond the day to day.
yeah, yeah, that's such a great example. We've talked about opportunity mindset as well, right? You never know where something might take you. And you and I say that our first conversation is an example of that when we first met. What I would say as well, right? When you get to strategic level and strategic mindset, and when you're thinking about that, it is so easy to think in a must be just results driven, like in
Mm,
leadership, right? But it is never, ever a wasted effort to be able to understand people's needs and to have those relationship building skills, even at those top levels. Because actually, that strategic element is also having your senior stakeholders having that feeling that you understand what they need from you. And
mm.
and so to have those relationship building skills alongside the results driven nature, there's a huge place for that. Absolutely
Oh,
massive.
I mean, I would say it's essential, really.
Absolutely.
It's essential. It's like actually, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to be able to achieve those results by yourself. You need that support. You need that vision to be shared and understood by other people. Like, particularly in a leadership role, you're not going to be able to do that at all by yourself. And your pace of acceleration will come down to the relationships that you've got. And obviously, I know
Yeah.
like technology as well. But yeah, I think that's like absolutely like fundamental in that, definitely.
Yeah, I might not have articulated myself well with that. Let me just reframe as well, because there is the thing about yourself and the support, but the way that you relate to others, how they feel understood by you,
Yeah,
because they will, we will talk about that visibility and that
yeah,
presence to
yeah,
say, oh, this head of procurement or this procurement director really gets us, really gets
yeah,
me, really gets what we need. So,
yeah,
you know, and we were, and I think that sometimes with this gap or perceived gap between operational and strategic is that you need to play the game, you need to have the power plays, you need to be good at the politics. And I had a really interesting conversation with a head of category recently around, well, when is it manipulation and when is it influence?
mm,
And when is it, you know, I
yeah,
hate power plays. I've got really strong ethical boundaries. Like, yeah,
yeah,
there is room for all of that. People
yeah,
need to know where you stand. It's not about if you're not a person who likes to play those games, and of course
yeah,
there are people, they exist everywhere, you
yeah,
know, that it
yeah,
doesn't mean that you can't play at that level of
yeah,
strategic, but to know where you stand on that
yeah,
is a really real, it's a really big asset, is what I'm saying. So I
yeah,
think that's another mindset gap for people is like, well, I'm not a political player. I'm sick of the company politics, you know, and to influence doesn't mean to manipulate. So it's just interesting because it came up in a conversation the other day, and
mm,
actually they're an exceptional leader and
yeah,
they'll be able to carry people along with them, but it can put people off if they
yeah,
feel like they don't behave that way.
yeah, yeah.
Did I go off on a
Right.
tangent then? I did, I didn't I? I went off on a tangent. I was getting on my soapbox of that. But it's our podcast, it's fine.
I like a soapbox and a tangent every now and then. It wasn't a tangent, Laura. It was a pivot.
The pivots, pivots, pivots.
Pivot.
Where's Ross from Friends with his sofa? Pivots.
So to conclude today, then, what are our takeaways for today, do you think?
I think the first important one is exactly what we were talking about, is define it. Define what
Yeah,
strategic means to you in your context where you are.
yeah. What it means to you, but also what it means to them, whoever
Yeah,
them are, you know,
in the
and it's kind
organization.
of, you know, it's that alignment piece. It's kind of working out where those definitions do align, you know, that probably might be a start point.
Yeah.
And you can build on that. And actually, you know, just because there is misalignment doesn't mean there is always going to be misalignment either. Like actually, particularly if you are coming in to do something different to what's been done before, there is going to be resistance, but that doesn't mean that just because they're not there right now, it doesn't mean they're never going to be there at all. So yeah, I think that I think is such a great point. But I think then it's I think the definition for you and for them, whoever them is, the company, boss, whoever. But then I think it's this gap analysis again, isn't it? I mean, it you know, it often comes down to this in so many of our conversations because we are helping people to get from A to B. But it's really understanding where is it that you are right now versus where you want to get to. And actually, you're not going to go from there here to there in one step. Often that is lots and lots and lots of smaller steps, incremental steps, shifts, some hidden, some visible. So I think it's actually understanding for the purposes of where you're most hoping to get to. What is that kind of gap analysis telling you? And is it about skills? Is it about relationship? Is it about support? Is it about experience? You know, what is it that's going to help you most? What and who and how?
Yeah, and again, it sounds very simple when you break it down like that. It's essential. It's the clarity you need to distill that gap that you think might be so big when actually it's not the reality. It could be
Yeah,
much smaller. We said it, I think, in the previous episode, like you're not starting from scratch here, that it's, you know, you're only a tweak away. You're
yeah,
never as far away as you think. So I think it's definitely a really good starting point. And we also touched upon internal mentors, finding examples of it in the business
yeah,
that you admire because you relate to them people, you know, try and use them as sounding boards or for
yeah,
advice, how they
yeah,
got there.
yeah. I think we didn't really come onto the sponsorship, but it could even be kind of a mentor or a sponsor, actually,
Yeah,
someone who is also going to advocate for you in that area that you're hoping to get to. So, and I think that kind of mentorship sometimes can't be provided internally, and in which case, then, you know, where can you lean into communities or networks or people externally that's going to enable you to kind of gain whatever it is you're looking to gain.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's
Another
where it starts.
fascinating topic. Sorry, cut over you there.
No, no, it is. And I was going to say the same thing, that it's probably the first foray into it, right? You know, we've sometimes
Totally.
taken an episode and decided that there's more to uncover, more to dive and delve into, which I think is probably likely when it comes to this topic. 'Cause it's quite an emotive one as well, really, I think,
Yeah.
because we didn't even touch upon that element of like, you know, how to stop yourself from retreating back into the operational because it feels more
Mm,
comfortable there.
yeah.
You know, maybe we can
Yeah.
cover that again another time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in once again. As always, we love to hear from you. We love to hear kind of what are your takeaways from these episodes. Where are you struggling? You know, where are you still struggling? Like, do feel free. And this isn't about commenting on posts, but feel free to comment on posts with this. But you know, also feel free to reach out individually to us as well, because you know, the more feedback we get, the more we're able to shape the help and support that we're able to offer going forwards. And, you know, we love getting that insight because it means that we can just make this more relevant and more beneficial for you. So, yeah, thank you for being part of this. And we will see you again, or you'll see, no, or you'll hear us again soon. Wow, that was a great ending.
We will see you next time. Oh, and you can send us a text as well via the podcast. So on your whichever platform, send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. All right, take care,
Okay,
everyone.
take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.